Welcome, everyone. Let's join in. Let's come on in. Um, I will have to apologize in advance because I took off some R&R to go down the shore, so I'm not in my normal location. So I'm hoping that Wi-Fi will cooperate. Have you ever discovered that just when you need things to go a certain way, that things go haywire? So welcome to Empowerment Moment with Dr. G.
Okay. Goodbye.
I'm so excited to be sharing some thoughts and some words with you all today. Hi, Lilia. Don't worry about the noisy background. That's what we're all here for. I see Michelle is on here. Welcome, Michelle. Welcome, Lilia. I'm so excited. And of course, I have my wonderful special guest with me tonight, and we'll be talking to her in a few minutes. But I just want to just thank you for joining in this evening, wherever time you're watching. If you're able to watch us later, just know that this is part of God's timing to get a word in. So it's since the beginning of the pandemic, moving away from having live programming, I went into this season of really talking about how things that we can do to help us to be empowered. And so I don't know how I came up with that word, but it just became a theme. And we started this empowerment series. So we call it Empowerment Moment with Dr. G. This goal here is to connect month to month and just share a word of encouragement. And so this month, I've been meditating on a lot, and it's been an interesting season. It's been a really interesting season. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone that's logged on. I don't know about you, but this pandemic has had me just like going up and down in circles and everywhere, right? Michelle, you're shaking your head like, yes. If Andrea could put it on a spotlight for me for a minute, that would be great. In essence, we're in a season where we are like, hey, it's not the easiest, but we're going to keep our focus. And so one thing that I've been meditating, and for many of you who know, I'm a woman of faith. So I wear my faith on my sleeve because that's what's enabled me to keep going in this journey. And no matter how hard things are, we know that God makes a way for us to push through. So if you're here watching us, I just want to remind you that God will always make a way for you. So one word that I've been meditating is from the book of Proverbs, which is the wisdom book. So many of us like to quote words that will inspire us and encourage us. And one of the words that I was inspired to just share with you is the importance of having wisdom. Right? Wisdom is crucial. So we are told in Proverbs 24, and I'm going to read from verse 36, and then I'm going to get into a conversation with a very amazing friend who I have invited here. And so just the word to encourage all of us is this: wisdom is important. And it says, through skillful and godly wisdom, a house, that is a life, a home, a family is built. And by understanding, it is established on a sound and good foundation. So through skillful and godly. So how do we ensure that we have a home that's built? It is understanding that we need skill set. And by understanding, it's established on sound and good foundation. So we need good foundation in order to be able to keep doing the things that we need in life. Without it, you're basically standing on a sinking sand. And it continues by saying, by knowledge, its rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. A wise man is strong, and a man of knowledge or a woman of knowledge strengthens his or her power. For by wise guidance, you could wage a war. And in an abundance of wise counselors, there's victory and there is safety. So basically, what we need to realize is that wisdom is foundational to anything we do in life. And wisdom comes from knowledge. And knowledge comes from having connections and networks. And so one of the things that I have learned on my journey of working with families is the importance of amassing as much knowledge as I can about how to raise children, about how to leverage resources in my community to be able to make sure that the things that I need, I can access it at the appropriate time. So I'll tell you a story. Earlier this week, I started to think about my son's future. You know, many of you know I have a son, Nicholas, and he's the reason why we're on this journey. And Nicholas has been a source of inspiration, a source of challenge. I'm not going to lie. Challenge because every time I think I figure something out, this young man figures something better for me. He has a mind of engineer. That's what I say, because my husband is an engineer. And every time they're walking around, they're thinking about ways that they can do things better. And so in our journey with him, he's now 20. We are now thinking about the future. And I'm having to make some really crucial decisions. And part of that process requires me to think outside of the box. So thinking outside of the box means leveraging my network and my community. And that is the reason why I think this conversation is so crucial. Wisdom. Wisdom is the principal asset that you and I need. So I am so excited tonight to introduce my dear friend, Sophia Mohammed, who is on Zoom with me. Welcome, Sophia. And of course, I have Patricia, and she's high-fiving her folks that are on here with us, Marlene, and a number of us. And Sophia, I am so thankful to you. I had a chance to speak with you earlier this week, and at the end of the conversation, I just felt like I am so inspired, so encouraged. And I won't do justice in introducing you. So I want you to introduce yourself. All I know is that I met this woman in 2009. Wow. 2009, yes.
A lifetime ago.
2009. We were at a press conference where the governor Corzine at that time. I had no idea. I was telling somebody earlier. I don't even know how I got there. And I met this woman, and you have been a source of inspiration for me. An advocate, a powerful, wonderful woman who advocates for so many people. So I just want you to tell your story so that folks can understand why I am such a big fan.
Oh, thank you. Let me tell you, when you started, and it's hot in here. I'm using my daughter's room as the my office today. She left for school 2 days ago, so excuse me if you start to see me steaming. But part of it is probably the mistiness, if that's a word, because I'm so full. Just hearing you in the introduction, our conversation from the other day, some of my walk, which is our walk, and our life experiences day to day, even up until the moment that I logged onto the Zoom, I just said, oh, thank God I am in such a blessed and faith-fueled space. I need this, and I appreciate you. And I'm so, all of you, when I saw Melanie and I saw Patricia, and I said, oh, my sisters are here. I'm so happy. So I'm Safia Amina Mohammed. Amina is my middle name. And who would have known that there are other Safia Mohammeds in the world, or at least in the United States? So I often reference my middle name. I am a mother of 5. I have 3 sons on the autism spectrum.
Wow.
My journey actually started, I've been parenting for 35 years. So my journey actually started about maybe 30 years ago when my oldest son, who doesn't have autism, but he had exhibited behavioral challenges and exhibited some symptoms of attention deficit, and he was considered gifted, but the school district wasn't meeting his needs. So the advocacy journey really started 30 years ago, but then fast forward to my 23-year-old, that's when my autism journey started, really with him back in, 1999, 2000. Wow. Yeah. And so since then, my 2 of my other sons were actually diagnosed later. It's interesting that we see how autism presents similarly in people on the spectrum, and yet differently. So echolalia can be different in different individuals, and stemming can be different in different individuals. And so it was amazing that I would find out when one son was 17, who's now 24, nearly 25, and I wouldn't find out until the other son was 7, and who's now 18. But I have since then become an advocate, not just for my own children and not just for my own needs as a parent, especially to know what I did not know and to seek and find information and resources and support. Support was so important, to connect with other families, other parents like you and our sisters who are on the line, and just to be able to have a safe space and safe souls to connect with, people who understand, so that you don't always feel marginalized, you don't always feel stigmatized when you're telling your story, and to know that it's okay to not be okay. It started out with me trying to figure out what was going on with the 2-year-old who was spinning around and jumping off of furniture and lining things up, and he was no longer talking, and he was not potty trained by 2, which was a standard in my family. And it was a process of going to several doctors and saying, listen, I don't know what it is, but I know it's something.
Wow.
And I need your help. And so when they told me, I think out of the first 3 pediatric neurologists or the pediatric developmental specialists who I saw, all 3 gave me different diagnoses.
Wow.
All 3 gave me different diagnoses. And it wasn't until the 4th diagnosis of PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, that I finally realized that I was onto something. But, again, I'm fast forward to today. It's been a long journey of working within organizations that provide peer support for caregivers of people with disabilities. And although autism is primarily my journey and some experience with having a son who was diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder.
Wow.
I found myself becoming an advocate for all disabilities, because we don't discriminate. We are the most diverse community in the world. Everyone's touched by some difference or some significant disability or different ability. And so I found myself not just navigating the advocacy spaces, but once I started running on passion, I realized that passion and saying, we deserve this and my son needs that, and not getting it, that's when I started to look at the policy and the statutes and the administrative code, and understanding the need for the laws to be in favor and in support of what's best for our sons and daughters and our nieces and nephews and our grandchildren and our cousins and our loved ones, our friends. Because, I can't stop reflecting on the way that you started this conversation. And when you mentioned God's time, we expect milestones as parents of people with disabilities, and particularly parents of people with autism. And yet, when they talk, that's God's time. And if they don't utter a word, a legible word, or not a legible word, but if they don't utter an intelligible word and a word that you can't understand, it's still God's timing. It's still God's choice, because there are ways to communicate with one another so that we can understand one another. And sometimes they're not always going to be auditory. They're not always going to be in words. Yeah, that smile or that nod when you see someone familiar. You don't have to utter a word. And so, and so it's important for us, I think, to speak more with our hearts, because we're often thinking or believing that we have to speak with our voices. But our hearts and our actions can say, to be honest, so much more, I think, than the voice ever could.
Wow. I
don't even know if I told you about me. I'm so inspired by when you started the conversation.
Well, that's part of why I always start the conversation that way, to say we're on a journey, and we're on a journey to grow. And part of growth is really realizing that we need people, we need connection, and we have to be open to learning, and then also to express our vulnerability. And I think one of the things that we've learned in this space is that being able to admit that, yes, I'm not okay. but I will be okay because I am going to get through it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think you said, and then it just hits me that you said, I have 3 children who, quote unquote, society has put a label on them, but it doesn't mean that they are not an individual person with thoughts, with ideas, with concept that they need to develop. So talk to me more about your journey and how you've been able to
Can you hear me? Am I freezing?
I can hear you fine. I think it's Auntie who's freezing.
Oh, okay. Well, if I can, I think I know where she's going. And I'll tell you, Genevieve said something so important when she talked about the labeling, and she talked about using certain words to describe, I'm just changing this light so hot, to describe or to ascribe to our loved ones, our special people who are differently abled. And to be honest, I've learned in navigating the spaces of working with and being friends with and supporting adults with disabilities that the language changes based on the individual, and it's 100% okay. For me, interestingly, I've had 5 children who society has labeled. So there's the eldest and being labeled having oppositional defiance disorder, being labeled as being gifted, being labeled as having attention deficit, being labeled as having depression, which, yes, still medical term, still an existing condition, and yet the label wasn't always used to an advantage in the way that it would support him. But if anything, sometimes those labels were used to, I think, to limit him. And so then the labels of autism spectrum disorder, which the diagnostic, the DSM-5 now states that all people on the autism spectrum, all people have autism. But back at the beginning of my journey and at the beginning of Genevieve's journey as well, there was the PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. I like to make sure that I'm using the names and not just the alphabet soup. There was Fragile X, there was Rett syndrome, there was autism, and there was Asperger's syndrome. And now all of them have been melded into the one pot of autism, and then there have been tiers and layers. And so one of my sons prefers his original diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, and I have to respect who he is as an individual and how he sees himself. And that's so important for me. And I've learned that through my journey, not just with my children, but developing friendships and kinships and relationships with adults with disabilities, and understanding that this journey wasn't always going to be about my children being children. Even ultimately, this journey would become a journey of me raising children to supporting adults. And then my daughter was also labeled, so to speak, as gifted. And so then there are certain stigmas that come along with that. So it's an interesting thing that I always had to look at their strengths, yes, and then look at the areas where they needed more support. And I often call myself the translator because I had to figure out a language that can connect me with the people who didn't understand the language that my children spoke. And when I'm saying that, I don't just mean literally the English language. I mean that love language or that learning language. Sometimes every learning style doesn't agree with every teaching style. And so I found myself having to be, and still find myself having to be a translator in a sense. And so looking at those labels, looking at those names, looking at those terms, looking at those diagnoses, and using that to their advantage so that we can build on their strengths, so that we can look at the benchmarks, so that we can see the areas where they were deficiencies or deficits or challenges, and so that we could work hard to overcome them. And then also to know and understand that if there was a challenge that they're not able to overcome, then how do we live with it? Which has to be okay too. Sometimes I think as parents, family members, caregivers, loved ones, even professionals, there are times when we want to fix people and we want to, but we have to wonder, why do we want to fix them? Is it because we think they're broken? And if we do, then it's not the people with autism and the people with disabilities that have to change. It's actually us. And it's actually our mindset and how we think of them, how we view their circumstances and their situations. I think that in not being ableist, so to speak, and not using ableism in supporting people with autism and people with disabilities, we can find ourselves being more of a partner to them. And so, of course, when we're raising people with disabilities, when we're raising people with autism, as caregivers and parents, we begin as that supportive connection, but ultimately, or the caregiver, the nurturer, and the leader of in a sense, we graduate and the roles start to change. And then it becomes a time when it's important for us to empower them. And so I'm going back to Genevieve's words from earlier, empowering them to be advocates for themselves, empowering them to speak for themselves. And like I said before, even if it's not audible, even if it's not with the voice, but speaking with the body language, speaking with the actions. And likewise, it's important for us to remind our loved ones to take a stand for themselves. If they don't like strawberry milk, why are we forcing strawberry milk on them? If their taste has changed. He liked strawberry milk for 9 years, but he doesn't anymore. So I can't be mad because now I bought a whole month's supply of strawberry milk. I have to respect the fact that his taste has changed. And so I think it's important for us as caregivers, as parents and family members and people in support of those with autism and other disabilities, other developmental disabilities, that we have to be willing to change with them because they do change. And oh boy, I see your back, Genevieve. And when we talked about those changes, boy, do they change.
Thank you so much. See, if God had to send somebody to be my helper today, it was you, because I knew it was your hands. I'm down the shore, just taking some few days with the family. So where we were, the Wi-Fi is not the greatest. So
I'm so glad. We talked about that too, about the getting away.
Yes. That was going to be the question that I was going to ask of you to talk about, since the theme is wisdom. Can you just talk on the importance of self-care and how have you done that, just to to inspire our listeners and people who are viewing it?
So I'll start off with the conversation that we had that I run away. I don't call it a vacation. I don't even call it a workcation. I just call it a runaway because I run away, but I don't run far, and I will find a local hotel, and not when I say local, within driving distance. Within driving distance is important because if God forbid there's ever an emergency, I'm able to get back home in time. Right. So I'll leave dad and children and dad and siblings and anyone else on the support team, whether it's mom or my siblings or cousins or whomever. I'll leave everyone with the instructions. I'll leave all the meds out and labeled, and I'll grab my laptop, in my essential oils, particularly my doTERRA essential oils. And I will, yes, and I will take my affirmation cards. I still have to text you those pictures. And I will go to a place, typically a place that has kitchenette. And I'll actually go make meals that I like.
Wow.
And I will go to the local grocery store and pick up some of those easy meals and some pick up flowers. And I will stay for 2 days. And one back in November, I stayed for 4 days. And I was getting the phone calls, are you ever coming home?
I was gonna say, so who's watching the kids? So how did you
all support? You know, it was a long journey to get to this place, to help them be assertive, to know how to take care of themselves and one another. And so now, because my youngest is 18, which sometimes I still have to really, slap myself and say, you officially have 5 adult people now.
Wow.
So their needs are all different. But if we have to use the labeling of the functionality, the lower functioning to the higher functioning, I'm not a fan of it, but just to give context and to help for the listeners and the viewers to understand, 2 are more independent and higher functioning, if that label is what helps you to understand where they are. So independent in that my 24-year-old was a direct support professional and taking care of people with disabilities, significant disabilities, using feeding tubes and administering medicine. My 35-year-old son also did that for several years. My daughter supported a family as well as direct support person. And my 18-year-old it prefers Asperger's syndrome, and which is, as the label states, a higher functioning level of the autism spectrum, which, again, yes, DSM-5, I know it's all autism now, but it's his life. Let him identify himself how he likes. And so, and with that and the learning disability, I know that he's still capable of getting up and washing up and brushing his teeth and going out in the world. And when he said, I don't want to be in special education classes anymore, and I want to be in, as he called it, regular high school, I said, okay, well, let's advocate for you to go to regular high school. And so he's mainstream with an IEP in a STEM school. And this is actually his senior year.
Take that deep breath, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I should fan myself for that too. Whoa.
But I mean, you said something powerful that I thought was very crucial. You used the word advocacy. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that? Is it only people who have a formal title of advocacy? Can you define what that is for the parent that now has a child that has special needs?
To be honest, we're all advocates when we stand up, when we speak up, when we acknowledge that there is a difference, when we acknowledge that there is a need to support someone, when we acknowledge that there's a need to provide someone with modifications or accommodations to help them to have equity, to be on an equal or an equitable plane. So because equality is not always the case for everyone. And I always think about that picture with the kids looking over the gate, looking at a baseball game where they were all on standing on the ground at the fence. And so that was equality because they're all standing at the fence, but on a crate, everyone had one crate, that's equal. But the equity was about, depending on the different heights of the individuals looking over the fence, they had different amounts of crates to ensure that they all had a view. And so that's the equity. And so the advocacy is in acknowledging the need for the equity, acknowledging that someone needs help, someone needs support. And so, of course, there are advocates who, and I've done extensive training in different types of areas within advocacy. And I've participated in various types of training programs. I've provided training for people. I hold a public office of a sorts, and within the state of New Jersey. And I say that very vaguely because I'm not here to speak for that organization, which is really important in our bylaws. But I can acknowledge my position, and yet my role here today is not in regard to that position. But so there's the advocacy, and the advocacy is in saying that student in the classroom that says, hey, Miss Jones, he doesn't have his glasses today and he can't see the board. Can he move up? You're advocating for your classmate.
Wow.
The classmate who may feel uncomfortable or stigmatized and may not want to speak up and say, I need to move up and I can't see the board.
So
that's advocacy.
What I'm hearing you say is advocacy is just that basic. People just think in our world, advocacy is going to some special training, but it's really saying, hey, I'm lifting up my hand because I don't think that person needs extra help. Let's make sure that person has an equal access like everybody else.
Absolutely.
By nature, the moment you become a parent, you are an advocate, regardless of what that individual's needs are. You speak up on behalf of that person. And then we train our children to be self-advocates.
And likewise, I was going to say, when we look at our beautiful children, and I look at my sons and my daughter, and I look at your beautiful daughters, advocates are siblings too.
Yes.
Advocates are cousins. Advocates are aunties and uncles and grandparents. And so that sibling helping to put on a sock.
Right.
And then saying, okay, I'm going to help you put that sock on today, but tomorrow you're going to do it yourself.
Right.
So that sibling is advocating by helping and supporting, and now teaching and modeling, and then now empowering that sibling to be a self-advocate. Right. And to be able to do it for themselves. And I'm not going to help you unless you ask me for help. So you're empowering them to say, hey, if you need help, I'm here to help, but I want you to ask for it. I want you to advocate, even if the advocacy is a gesture of, I don't have the auditory ability, but I can bring those socks to you and say, hey, sister, here are the socks. Can we do this together?
Yeah. Can you just encourage or give a parents or viewers who are listening today words that will inspire them, or things that you've learned along the journey that you think are crucial elements that they need to also consider?
We talked, I know you and I talked about what was it normal?
Yeah. What is normal, and what's, we
what
talk
is normal?
About what's normal. And I think in the era of COVID, we all have to now consider what's normal. And so, yes, speak to a little bit of that.
Yeah. So we often talk about this is our new normal. We want to get back to normal, but what is normal? And so that I hope that in reflection of our experiences, our being families and people who are impacted by autism, who are impacted by disabilities. I hope that in watching our lives and watching adults with disabilities navigate the world, I hope that you understand that there truly is no sense of normal. Normal is so subjective, and normal is also deceptive. It's so deceptive. There is no real normal. And so I've heard people say things like that, like, well, your kids are doing really great. And I think they're doing just as well as normal kids.
Right.
My kids are normal kids. My kids are normal. This is our normal. And this is okay. Right. And this is okay because this is how we navigate our life. And it's okay when we fall, and it's okay when we get up. It's okay if we don't get up and we scoot across the floor because there's still movement.
Right.
It's okay if we fall and we ask for help to get up. Right. All of that, all encompasses, I think, we sometimes mistake normal for what's typical. And what's typical is kind of cultural, but we really have to get away from the culture of considering what is familiar to us and yet different to be normal, because I don't think using that term in context of describing people, especially children and their differences, I don't think it's really a fair term for us to use in reference to a person's abilities or disabilities. So I hope, if anything, if I have to give any advice, I hope that we start to get away from using the label of and the term normal and referring to people, and just call people people. Is that okay? I'm a person, I'm a human, I'm a soul.
Right.
Yeah, or just ask someone how they want to be referenced.
And you know, that's so important, because oftentimes parents feel ashamed because they perceive that their child needs extra support to be able to achieve certain outcomes. And that because that individual needs extra support, that is termed as abnormal. But the reality is that we all gonna need some support one way or the other. You
Yeah.
know, I reached out to you because I was like, you know what? Hey, why don't you come on here and let's talk about your journey? And I'm glad that you did mention that while you may serve in certain public responsibilities, you are still a mom. You are still wearing your own hat. You are telling your story, and it's not on behalf of any organization, but it is important that people see you and I in our normalcy, and realizing that we are all individuals and we're all normal the way God created us to be. And that's so important. And that's one of the things that we're talked about. And we're like, yeah, what is really normal? Because
That's right.
at the end of the day, my normal is my normal. Your normal is your normal. So for parents listening out there, that each one of your children are their norm. And each season of life, they're going to grow and have different needs. And with each need requires different resources that are necessary. The value of being a huge advocate is always being able to say, listen, I don't think we're doing enough for this person right now. I think there's more. And that's one of the things that I've gleaned from, listening to you and watching you over the years. And it's important that God, who created us, is the source that we go to when we have questions. But fundamentally, God also brings people around us that we can connect to. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you and I to talk. And while we were talking, not to be promotional, but you were sharing a little bit about one of the things that you started to do, which is really getting into real estate and also getting into travel. I wanted you to speak to a little bit about why you decided to make a change professionally, because that might be a source of inspiration for somebody listening. Because of the COVID pandemic, people are having to rethink work. And so perhaps regardless of what your responsibilities and the load are, there is still opportunity for transformation. Can you talk a little bit about that? I just feel like it's an opportunity for parents to know some of the resources that we have in our community, and you are certainly one of them. So please feel free.
Thank you so much. So the travel came about, actually travel, it's interesting you talk about that. I didn't realize how much of a transition it was. Moving out and away from the peer support and jumping into travel, I found myself first wanting to become a travel agent. Actually, my mother-in-law passed away several years ago, and I felt very paralyzed. And I said, how in the world are we going to get 6 to 7 people, my husband, myself, and my children, down to Georgia? And I called a good friend, and he said, okay, you've traveled before, you know what to do. And I said, I know, but I just feel so paralyzed right now. He and his wife were in the travel industry. Well, long story short, he said, well, today I'm going to tell you what to do and guide you. But tomorrow, meaning when you get back and you've grieved and you're settled, you're going to do this yourself, because I have a feeling that you have a lot to offer to families like yours. Who knew? Fast forward 3 years, I've been now focused more on accessible travel, ensuring that people who are elderly, people who have significant needs, families traveling with children, people with disabilities, families traveling with people with disabilities, ensuring that they have the opportunity to go where they want to go, to find out the places that are open to them, that are accessible to them, that can provide them with modifications and accommodations to ensure that they have the best travel and vacation, getaway experiences as anyone else would like to have, ensuring that people are navigating through the airport, that they're having a concierge lounge experience, ensuring that they have all of the transportation needs met, knowing that you don't have to bring some of your mobility devices and bring some of your equipment with you, that you can rent these things. All of these things were so important for me to know and understand so that I can help people to see that there's not much of a difference between us when it comes to traveling as an individual versus traveling as an individual with disabilities. It's the same experience as in school or any other aspect of life. It's about understanding our needs and then making sure that the needs and the accommodations are met. And so then fast forward to the conversations that we were having about our sons getting older now and their needs changing, and wondering, will they be adults living at home with us? We may want them home, but they may not want to be home with us anymore. They may be ready to be out. They may not fathom how that's going to happen. But all I know is that I'm ready to not live here with them anymore. And so I delve into real estate because I wanted to have the understanding of how to help and support my sons to either own their own homes, own their own condominiums, rental, ensuring that they're going through a fair and just rental process. If it's a rental property, if they're going to rent apartments, ensuring that the vetting system is right. They may they may want to have roommates, ensuring that perhaps my sons who have autism may share an apartment or home with friends who have disabilities as well, ensuring that they have the right support staff, understanding the communities that are inclusive and the communities that have that will meet the needs of people with disabilities, because that's really important as well. And so during this pandemic, I've been busy obtaining my New Jersey real estate license. So I'm now a New Jersey realtor, and I'm excited about that because I want to not just help my own children, but it started to really expand my thought process and the conversations that I've had with parents, with you, and with some other parent friends and sister friends, and realizing that this is not just one and done. And to be honest, this is something that I think in many of our minority communities and however an individual will identify themselves. Minority communities, protected classes. I mean, I identify as Black. I identify as female. I identify as Muslim. When people ask me my pronouns, I say she, her, and mom, because when people talk to you, they say, well, we have to find out what mom wants, not what she wants, but they say what mom wants. And so I have to ensure that the needs of people are met, that their rights are protected and respected. And I thought, what better way to do that than to dive right in and get heavily entrenched and involved in this world of accessibility travel. And I didn't know that special needs real estate was a niche, and it is. And I'm so happy to be a part of it. And I'm looking forward to the journey and supporting families.
I mean, I was so happy to hear you say that because, housing and really understanding the process is so crucial. When I first came to learn about the importance of having a special needs trust, I mean, I've had attorneys do topics for us in the past on that issue, and parents have been astounded to know that there's specific components that they need to put in place, right? And so hearing about, a realtor that is now focused in that arena, I think really lifts the burden off of a lot of us, because we know, hey, we have go-tos who we can ask questions of. Additionally, thinking about travel has always been something that as a family, we've always had to brainstorm how effectively are we going to get away and make sure Nick is safe and everybody has a good time. And that's why I wanted you to speak to it, because, I try not to be promotional in any way to try to say, hey, somebody go here or there. We're not trying to endorse any particular company, but it's more about knowledge that these things exist, so that people, when they're in that place of trying to figure out what to do, there is knowledge out there. So, which is one of the reasons why when you and I spoke yesterday, I said, oh no, we got to get you on here. And of course, my Wi-Fi almost didn't cooperate. I was in the dark, but there is light. I'm like, okay, God, there's got to be light in this room that I'm in, and found it. My daughter texted me on the side, Mom, you're very dark. I'm like, no, I'm not trying to stay dark, but the conversation is going on. It's powerful. And Sophia, I can't say thank you enough. I mean, just seeing the work that you're doing on behalf of the state of New Jersey, on the sitting on the council and giving the voice of the voiceless, representing all of us on, from all the families that are on here. I want to say thank you. God bless you for being a resource, for being a tool in God's hands to really help us on this journey. So crucial. And we, for the MyGo family and supporters, Sophia was one of our advocates of the year a few years back at our gala event, just because like I said, I just admire this woman and all that God is enabling her to do. And as we round off our conversation, I just want to remind people again that, God loves you. And he wants you to know that in your moment of trials and tribulation, there's help. The book of Psalms says that the Lord hears his people when they call him for help. He rescues them from all their trouble. He is close to the brokenhearted, and he rescues those whose spirits are crushed. I just felt like overwhelmed when I think about the responsibilities that I have for my son and my kids and the rest of them. And then when God allows you to connect to someone who's walking the journey, all of a sudden you feel like that burden is lifted. And that's who you were to me this week, my sister. And so I want to thank God for your life. And for those who are watching us, really know that help is here. Please don't suffer in silence. Please know that the God that gave you this child or children has also made resources available to you. Oftentimes we just don't know where to look. And that's why I said wisdom is foundational. Knowledge is key. Get the knowledge that you need, because there are people out there like Sophia, like Detroit, like Nadine, who have been on here. We have Mylene, we have Michelle and Lilia and Patricia. And I'm naming those who I'm literally seeing right now to make the point that we have a village and we have a tribe. And you are not by yourself and you're not alone. And know that the God that has sent you this child will be the God that will bring you the raft, so that you don't have to feel like you're drowning. So I want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for bearing with my Wi-Fi almost nightmare. One thing I will say is that the journey on the autism spectrum calls you to be resilient. When that Wi-Fi cut out, I'm like, I'm gonna get it back in here. I don't know how long it takes me. And while I was gone, my sister held the fort for me. And that's a perfect example of that. And what I'm wearing tonight is my Nick's Hope shirt that says, and hope means holding on to possibilities every day. And why I have this hope is because I believe that no matter where we're going through, there is holding on. Don't give up, hold out, because God loves you. So Sophia, I want to just leave you if you have any last words that you want to say to everybody before we round out.
Well, actually, I want to share your words, because you answered the question, what is normal? And normal is the way God meant us to be.
Wow.
That's what makes us normal.
Wow.
What makes us normal is exactly what God meant us to be.
Wow. Awesome. So when somebody says, is your child normal? You said, absolutely. It doesn't matter what label people put them on there. To you, they're your loved one, and they are normal. So on that note, I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us for Empowerment Moment with Dr. G. I want to thank all of you. Sophia, God bless you once again.
God bless you, Genevieve.
Connecting, because we got business to do. We got life to transform, and we got communities to build, because that's what God is enabling us to do. So on that note, I want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and have a fantastic evening. Bye-bye now.